And so this was our introduction to the kingdom mentality, because we know from the Word of God that there's two kingdoms, the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness. That's it. And if you're not in one, you're in the other. And so we need to then understand what is a kingdom and how it operates. If we're going to look at King David, I think that it's a really good foundation for to get a hold of. We did teach it in the course that we did, the mission of Jesus. However, a lot of people here weren't in that at that time. So it's very useful to have an understanding and a grasp of what it really means, because we live in a democratic society, and although we have a queen, and depending which side of the community you live on, depends whether or not you recognise her. If you live in the side of the community that doesn't recognise the monarchy, then you have absolutely no understanding of how a kingdom operates, because a kingdom operates on the basis that the king, first of all, the king owns everything, and you serve the king. But he also has serious responsibilities to take care of you and your every need. And so when we begin to understand that, we can start to apply the principles of the kingdom to ourselves in our own life. And whilst this is an Old Testament, the kingdom, we can start to see the implications of a kingdom. We're not going into the kingdom tonight, but it's still very useful to get a hold of that. Last week we did an overview, and we did basically a timeline of David's life from he was first called of God, anointed, and then some 20 years later he ended up getting placed into his appointment. So there was a long spell of training for David before he became king. Looked at the timeline and the difference between the anointing time and the appointing, the training that took place over that period of time, and basically the journey of David's life from when he was first called. This bolshy teenager who was willing to stand up to the giants that absolutely no other man was willing to do. And then you see this same man lie and feign madness. And then we see him entering into numerous relationships, including adulterous ones. And then as a result of all of that, his children go wayward in life, and there's a judgment placed on him, and he is told that the sword will not depart from his home. To the point that he's banned then from building the temple, and the project is passed on to Solomon. And yet, this is the one man in the Bible that God declares, this is a man after my own heart. Would you want to be married to David? No. When we think about it in those terms, Kim and I have talked about this through the week. Is that the kind of man that you'd want to end up with? Because it's really not. And yet, there was something so special about him that God said about him that he was a man after his own heart. And so we really need to find out why God decreed that, because God does not see as man sees. And we need to get something into our own spirits about why this declaration was made. Because no matter what we think, God's never wrong. So we're going to look at the foundation of where he starts through his journey, but tonight specifically we're going to look at the story that everybody thinks is old hat and that you can't really learn anything from, and yet the lessons in it are huge. They're far bigger than in anything else. I taught this first in Bible school down in Uri. I taught it again in church service, except it was completely different. I then taught it again in Caris, and again it was completely different. I rewrote everything completely because there's so many lessons, and on none of them I got finished. because if we study it out, we start to see principles that are just huge, the implications for our own lives. So we'll start it off with reading through it. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shochoth, which belongeth to Judah, and pits between Shochoth and Azekah and Ephazdammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together in pits by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. And there went out a champion out of the camp of Philistines, named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and a weight of coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spearhead weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. We have just reached verse 7. What's the first thing that you notice when you read those 7 verses? What does every single verse have something to say about?
What he was built like, what he was wearing, his armour. His armour. Yeah.
So his height, the weight, the very weight of his armour. There's, what's he called?
Goliath.
What else is he called? Champion. How do you get the name of being a champion?
By defeating everything.
When you fight.
Yeah. You've already got victories under your belt. Because you're not a champion unless you've already got victories. So there went out of Gath a champion who was 9 foot tall, with, as we go into all of these, so what does he come out? Like in fierce intimidation, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all we see here is the giant. There's no mention of God. There's just an intimidating enemy who's threatening.
Like the devil.
Yeah, exactly like the devil. Mm-hmm. He comes out intimidating and in strength and full force. And he had someone go before him with a shield, and he had his whole army behind him. Verse 8, and he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them, why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. So here's this intimidating force, and he doesn't say, all of you come and get me. He says, choose one man. Have you anybody that's my match? Have you anybody with the history of victories behind them that I've got? Have you anybody with so many defeats under their belt that they've been declared a champion? That I have so many followers and someone that's going before me? If you be able to fight with me and to kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. So we see that Goliath comes out. Everybody knows he's the champion. He comes out threatening. He comes out in such armour that really we can't even measure it in our own hands. And he issues this challenge to the Israelites. We've got to remember, if you go back to, I think it's possibly in Exodus, the Philistines had taken some of the Israelites into slavery for them. And so they have a memory of this history. So the history isn't just that he's a champion and they haven't been defeated by him. They have been underneath their rulership. When Saul of all of Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Was Saul not supposed to be following God? Did Samuel not annoy it?
But then, I suppose when he seen this big giant, the 9 foot tall, looking for somebody.
It was the same giant that David saw.
Yeah. Two different perspectives. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
I was
two
just wondering,
complete.
like, how are we going to get to fight this?
Saul, we've got to remember, when we heard about Saul, the son of Kish, when you listen to what was described about Saul, what was he described as? Head and shoulders taller than the others. So he was probably a reasonably good match, you know, in terms of size compared with anybody else. Not as much so as Goliath, but nevertheless he was head and shoulders, and he had been anointed king by God. Remember, God had said to him, "This day the kingdom has been rent from you." Samuel actually said that he would have kept the kingdom if he hadn't disobeyed God. So God would have honoured the people's choice, and he would have given them victory. But he wasn't
But he didn't
willing
want
to
to put
believe.
himself forward.
No, he didn't.
You probably knew that God was the
At this stage,
one.
do you think so? What makes you think that?
Well, why did he
Because he wouldn't be
want
afraid.
somebody else? Probably just didn't trust God enough.
How many Christians don't trust God enough?
That's the point.
Isn't it? We don't know if he knows it. We might have heard things through the grapevine that David had been anointed. There's a lot of speculation on that, and we don't know for sure. But the thing was that he evidenced where his faith lay. And he evidenced his faith not only in not going forward, but one of the other things that he evidenced his lack of faith in was when David offered. He says, "Okay, then take my armour. And, you know, I'll give you some preparation for it."
Anybody but me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much it in a nutshell, isn't it, Rebecca? Anybody but me. How many of us are willing to actually step out and be the Daniel, the Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego? And the victories come when the line is drawn. The victory came from Moses when his back was to the Red Sea. Joseph, look at the vision he was given. Then he's dumped down a well and sold into slavery. Daniel, as soon as he was discovered that he was a godly man, a decree was issued to prevent him from praying. And the Hebrews, that's their Babylonian names, but
I think in those days they were alive a lot more than God and what we do.
yeah, I think you're right. Why do you think that is?
Has to be spiritual. Must be.
We have been given the Holy Spirit to live in us.
Yeah.
Do you know we find the greatest reliance on God? In this day and age? Yeah. Third world countries.
Yeah.
Places who do understand, there's people who don't even believe there's a spirit realm in this country. They would laugh at you.
You talk about witchcraft even in the church, that a lot of the people just laugh at
Yeah. That's exactly
it.
right.
You're considered a nutcase.
Mm-hmm. If you start talking about devils and demons and how they operate,
That doesn't happen these days. That was back in the days.
or else it was just a fable.
Yep.
There's-
The paper's even getting worse. In the paper today it says a woman married a ghost at 300 years old.
Ghost?
That's ghost.
Oh, ghost.
A
Ghost.
spirit.
Ghost.
That's a spirit.
A spirit.
A ghost.
Yeah, no.
That's some paper that's in the
An operation.
She did what?
in the paper today.
She married a ghost?
Yes, married a ghost.
A ghost.
That's
Goats.
what
I
Emily,
thought he said goats.
Goats.
I said dairy goats.
no, goats. Go by the
I'm not
goat.
original.
100 years old. This is their heads away.
Their heads away, alright.
Right, well, I haven't heard that.
I don't know what you're going here next.
You're talking up the left.
That's what it said.
So it must be people would need to say anything.
That's the sun paper for you.
The sun must be true. So, verse 12. Now David was the son of the Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons, and the man went among men for an old man in the days of Saul. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. And the names of the 3 sons that went to battle were Eliab the firstborn, and the next unto him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening, and presented himself 40 days. So he was really taunting and mocking, wasn't he? In the extreme.
You tend to put the fear of God in you.
Yeah. Well, the fear of Philistines anyway. Or their God. Who's the Philistine God? Who does the Philistines worship? It was one close. They had several, but their primary one was actually Dagon. But Molech was part. Yeah, they were part and parcel of the same. What's 40 days represent? Usually in the Bible.
Tested.
Represents some of it was Jesus.
Yeah, it's testing or like a probation period.
40 days in the wilderness.
Yeah, it's a period of tempting or testing. So, what was it? 40 days, and yes.
How did King know to go out for 40 days in the winter?
I know. Well, maybe he didn't. Maybe David was just sent on the 40th day. You know, the plan of God is, you know, he has divine appointments. And so he maybe wasn't going to stop at the 40 days. It was the fact that David was sent then on this errand. David, when he returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep, and the Philistine drew near morning and evening 40 days. And Jesse said unto David his son, Take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren. Carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines, and David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with the keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench as the host that was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, and ran into the army, and came and saluted his brethren. As he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the army of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words. And David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, Have you seen this man that has come up? Surely to defy Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king shall enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. And David spake to the men, and stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that kills this Philistine, and take away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? What's the first thing we see about David in these verses when he comes in? When David's introduced into the picture here?
It's not food.
There's-
Iran.
Iran.
Iran defaces them.
He ran the face, yes.
Yeah.
He did run the face of the enemy. But I thought you were talking about when he ran from the sheep there. The very first thing here we see is the accusation that we're going to see in a minute. Who have you left those few sheep with? First thing it tells you back here is he left the sheep with the keeper.
Who was the keeper? I'm just thinking, what was that?
I have no idea who the keeper was. I presume that it was one of their housemaids of some sort. I'm not sure. But he didn't just walk away and leave his responsibilities. He took care of what he needed to take care of. He did the errand on behalf of his father. And then he overheard what was happening with this champion. And here we see what shall be done. Here he says, what's the reward? What are you given for this? What shall be done for the man who does this thing? For the man, not just who does this man that kills this Philistine. Notice that as well. What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine? That's a declaration to begin with. He doesn't say who goes out to fight. What shall be done for the man who kills him? And taketh away the reproach from Israel.
David didn't ask that question, did he?
David spoke to the man and stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine? So here we see
26.
he asks what the reward is. He makes a declaration about the outcome, and then he makes a further declaration. There's two parts to this. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine? The very first thing he says is, what's the reward for the man that not just kills him, but will take away the reproach? He knows that this is a reproach to God's people. So he knows that God's on his side. Who is this uncircumcised? Who's this person without a covenant with the living God? Who does he think he is? Coming out with that? Does he not know who I am? I'm a child of God. And he literally was a child. You know, we talk about ourselves being a child of God. But he was a child. He was just a teenager. But the very first thing that he comes in with the kill is, you've no covenant with God, so you've lost. Before you begin the battle, you've lost. It's finished before it begins, because you're not circumcised and I am. The battle's fixed, the battle's rigged, and God has rigged it, and I'm the winner. So it makes no difference what you do, what you say, how tall you are, how big your muscles are, how strong you are, or how much armour you've got on. Because you have already lost. It has been decreed in heavens that you've lost, because you're an uncircumcised Philistine. That is mega, because all these men, not one of them said that. Where did he learn that? From his parents. His parents didn't even see fit to bring him in to declare that he was their sons. His father certainly didn't.
Did he learn it in his relationship with God?
It's
Did
the only
he know
place.
it? Did he know it? He knew the living God personally.
He obviously did, but he may have had a good relationship, perhaps from his mother's side, teaching from there, and then he has entered into that relationship. Doesn't really clarify it here. So it goes on that he should defy the armies of the living God. Everything about what David said is victory, 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 victory. There's no doubt, there's no hesitation. And yet, who are the people that actually come against him in the first place when he makes this declaration? Who's the first people to come against him?
His brothers.
It comes from within his own household. So often in Christian circles, your opposition, you don't have to go any further than the front door to find the opposition to the things of God. And the people answered him after this manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spoke unto this man. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David. Obviously he was jealous, and said, Why came you down hither? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride and thy naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou might see the battle. And David said, I mean, this is such a childish statement. What have I done now? What have I done now? I mean, you can actually just picture that part. And then he grows up again and says, Is there not a cause? You know, here he is, he's done nothing wrong, and he's got this accusation. What have I done now? I always thought that was so class. I actually highlighted it, and I think I just highlighted it more for the fun of it. And he turned from him towards another, and spake after the same manner, and the people answered him again after the former manner. And when the words were heard which David spoke, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Here we see that David was already anointed in chapter 16. But what does he say to Saul? David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant. Saul, I'm your servant. He is submitted under that authority of Saul. He knows that Samuel has come and said, You're the man, God has chosen you, you're going to be king. But he submits. And you know, that's an attitude that he maintains right the way throughout, even throughout Saul's attempts to kill him. We'll go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he is a man of war from his youth. So what he's saying is, have you seen him? Have you any idea how many victories he's got under his belt? And in fact, he was winning victories when he was your age, and he has all this experience. And David said to Saul, Thy servant has kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear and took a lamb out of the flock, and I went out after him and smote him and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and smote him and slew him. The servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them. He doesn't waver. Seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. The number of times that David says, this is his fate because he has defied the armies of the living God. Because he's an uncircumcised Philistine. Because he has defied the armies of the living God. Over and over and over, we see that clearly David has meditated on certain aspects of the war was an ongoing, or the feud, or the battle had been ongoing between the Israelites and the Philistines. We'll start to see that his thinking patterns had already been developed. He had a plan of action. Maybe he hoped that he would get into this position, because he certainly came in fearless.
Slight digression, but what was the purpose of circumcision?
It was to be a type and shadow of the circumcision of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
With us, when we get born again, we have our heart circumcised. Because they don't get born again, this was an outward statement of the covenant that was made. And so they were identified by the circumcision. And there's some interesting facts around the circumcision if you look at it as well. The circumcision is done on the 8th day. The medical knowledge that we have today tells us that that's the safest day. That's the day that the vitamin K and protrobin or something is at its highest. It's at optimum, and so that is the safest day to do it. But number 8 is also a reflection of new beginnings. Mm-hmm. We know that that's the number that is used, and David also was the 8th son, so he was the new beginning. So there's, I dare say you probably wouldn't remember it after that. The ones that had it done at when they were older, you know, the ones. Do you remember the battle that was? Who was it between? But they had told them, if you get circumcised, we'll accept you. And then they were all in agony, and they went in and slaughtered them all. But yes, that's
Sure, it's all done under anaesthetic now. Easy.
Oh, yeah.
Straight in and straight out. Oh, it's another thing. Yeah, they don't know me. I know all right. They don't know me. Try having a couple of children.
So, verse 38, and Saul armed David with his armour, and he put on helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail, and David girded his sword upon his armour, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off of him. Why did David refuse?
They were too heavy for him and
Didn't
they
fit
didn't
right.
fit him. And
Didn't fit right, it wasn't his armour. What did he mean he hadn't proved it?
he hadn't fought for the window. The statue
Yes.
wore the armour.
He had proved God's armour, the spiritual armour, he had not proved this armour. You see, this armour was a type of the flesh, so if he had gone out in this armour, he would have only replicated the champion. And if he was going out in the flesh, he was going to have to fight in the flesh. And if you're going to fight with a champion who is a champion in the flesh, you're going to lose. We can't fight Satan with Satan's rules. We can only defeat Satan when we enter into higher dimensions and the laws of the kingdom. And that's one of the reasons why we look at the laws of the kingdom. What David was doing here was implementing the higher law, the laws of the kingdom of God. And what these laws are basically is in faith and in trust. And it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and slang it, and smote the Philistine in the forehead, that the stone sunk into the forehead, and he fell upon his face on the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with the sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword and drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. Were all the Philistines not supposed to be giants? And yet, as soon as one godly man stood up to their champion, they turned and fled. What was the purpose of standing on and cutting off his head?
Sure, it's really there.
It was one of the methods that they used in that era of time. And one to prove that they were already dead. And one of the other things is you present it on plate and you put it up as a trophy. But it's also one of the things that we have been decreed is that the enemy is under our feet. There's so many things, so many lessons and so many types in this that we can start to see as we go through all of the scriptures.
I don't think all the Philistines were giants. I think some of them were.
I think there was there were quite a numerous amount of.
They had brothers, hadn't they? Because whenever David later on went to King And was it Ashish or Gav or something?
Yeah.
He seems to have been just an ordinary man.
Did David have his doubts? Because he brought 5 stones apart.
I don't think that he did. I mean, there's various teachings about him because he knew he had 4 brothers, because the 4 brothers are actually named. And then there's other teaching that would teach that the reason he took 5 is because 5 is the number of grace, and it was the grace of God that won him the battle. I don't think he had any doubts by the challenge that he has come in. He made the declaration. David said to the Philistine, "Thou comest at me with a sword and with a spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into my hand, and I will smite thee and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God of Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with the sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." See, he makes the declaration. I think smell some burning, Sam.
Toast from earlier on.
It smells more like electrical burning. I can smell it.
It's cool.
I don't think it's coffee. I'm not one to be taking any of it. That's what it smells like.
You're on peppermint tea.
I am.
It's
So-
peppermint and the tea.
So we actually see here that David is really confident that all he has to do is show up with a slingshot, because he makes the declaration, the battle is the Lord's. Do we try to help God out sometimes in the battles? A lot. An awful lot. The only time that we really are willing to hand it all over to God is when it's totally impossible and we know that there's only Him can bring us through. That's really sad, because when He does prove Himself and bring us through, the next time something happens that we could give a wee helping hand with, we do it. And we see David does the same thing later, when he takes the sword of Goliath from the priest. He actually is responsible for mass slaughter because of his own lack of faith, and through his own lack of faith he tells lies, and through that the priest all gets slaughtered. So we see that his journey is pretty much like everybody else's. That there is this grand victory. There's a few victories, there's the grand victory, there's his servant heart, and then there's this period of doubt where he questions something. Something's not quite right. Is that okay, is it?
Yeah. Forget the imagination.
So,
No, he really trusted God and then he fell back into the flames. Like the rest of us.
I hear
Parents,
yeah, like every single person could actually say. But what was different about him? Some of us stay in the flesh.
Say that again there.
Some of us stay in the flesh. Some of us continue to try to operate using worldly principles. And we excuse it sometimes because we believe our motives are right. Have you given God a helping hand to try and get somebody saved?
no why.
But what does the Bible say?
The Spirit draws them, or draws them.
If the Spirit draws them, we have a job to do to witness. So what is our part in it? To tell somebody the good news of the gospel.
Sow the seed.
to sow the seed, and then we need to pray over it. And then when it doesn't happen as quickly as we would like, then we just give it a wee shunt. Then what happens if it isn't the Spirit? Those Bible thumpers, don't go near them. They'll just be preaching at you.
That's sort of encouraging because there's wee lads went into the shop today and he was out of it.
Mm.
And he says, I'm trying to find God and all. Like, you know, it's one of those things, they'll lead him to the Lord or to him not. You know? So, just pray for him, pray with him.
Did you name the Lord?
No,
No.
because I didn't feel the time was right then. Well, whenever he was near the shop, he certainly looked a good bit better.
Well, do you know what? The best thing that you can do after it is just to continue to pray for him, keep lifting him up in prayer, pray that he'll come back into you.
I've told him to go back
On
on Thursday.
Thursday.
And it comes on the Thursday.
What?
You're not that again the Thursday.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Good. I hope he comes in on Thursday.
So,
Are you doing the teas and coffees now? Is that what you're doing from 10 to 4?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.